Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I wanted to continue off where I left off with talking about my spiritual journey and what sort of led me to even start my YouTube channel and just about how that process was, and also just sort of like with an update on what's been happening in life since then. Like when it comes to like me trying to better myself when it comes to school, me having worked now with the special needs population as a paraprofessional for about 2 years, trying to move out, a lot of life lessons that happened since last year, and losing friends, but also gaining some new ones, and how that experience has been dealing with like dating and everything, and trying to find a relationship as I'm getting older, and I'm thinking about like wanting a family and everything, getting married, that type of stuff. And I guess sort of just everything that happens in between. So for those of you who are sort of new to my channel, I used to have an old one, but I had to make a new one because I couldn't like remember the password to my old one, and I explained that in like my first video. So you can take a look at my other ones as well. But basically, what had made me start my spirituality journey, I never really even knew what spirituality was, to be honest. I had grew up in my grandma's house my whole life. I'm still in there actually, but she has since retired and moved to Florida. And so I remember like as a kid growing up, I always, like had to go to church every Sunday. And I just remember like having a lot of questions about like what our purpose is in life, or like who is it exactly that created the universe or what, but never really getting direct answers. And I was always just a very curious person growing up. And so when she retired and I wasn't like forced to go to church anymore, and I could sort of like make my own decisions in life, that's when I started like sort of like thinking about spirituality. And like I'd always been around like very open-minded people who like brought up very interesting conversations and topics about like, the creation of the universe, and politics and race, and like, different economic systems, and just things that like kind of we see and we don't see in the daily life, whether we choose to like acknowledge it or not. And so I remember that I was always like pretty curious about it, but like I never really like dove into it or did like my own research or anything, or felt this calling to like, do anything besides like just exist in a sense. And this is at a point where I was surrounding myself with people that like weren't exactly like my friends, and weren't necessarily like the best influence, but there were people that I felt like I connected to, and we could smoke and we could like talk about everyday life. But there weren't really people that like we were motivating each other in any way to like want to be better versions of ourselves, or people where I felt like we knew each other and like our family and like our friends, and we really like had this bond. And so I wasn't making like certain things a priority in my life the way that I should have, in a sense. And so it's around 2020, 2021. This is my final breakup with my first love. And I feel like this depression and anxiety, in a sense. And I was just very lost. And this is also around the time of like COVID, where we were like forced to be by ourselves and stay inside and like kind of like reflect on everything that's happened and figure out who we are as people, outside of like going to school or going to work or like having distractions in our life. And so I'm out of a relationship. I'm single. I don't really like, I have friends, but like they're not people that I would say that like I hang out with on a consistent basis, or like really speak to like that. And so I was really depressed, and I'm really missing my first love. And I just remember like always feeling like someone was trying to talk to me, or I was getting like this really intense pressure like in my forehead or just around my body in general, and I wasn't really sure like where it was coming from or what it was exactly. But I would get it like just randomly, or like start waking up at like 2, 3 in the morning out of nowhere, and like sort of just feeling the need to meditate before I even like really knew what that was. Or I just felt the need to have to like sort of do like a lot of inner reflection. And so I found myself like researching about shadow work and what's that like, and sort of like going through all the different issues that you have when it comes to like abandonment issues, or like issues that you had with your parents growing up, or maybe you felt like they weren't there enough for you, or you felt like you were alone in a lot of situations, or you felt excited to like tell them about something, but it wasn't really the reaction that you were expecting. So now you kind of feel like it wasn't really worth bringing up in the first place. And just doing like a lot of inner shadow work on myself, and how I've let people like cross my boundaries, or like how I've crossed their boundaries, and just like really looking at myself as a person. So I learned about shadow work, and I did the work on myself, and it took a lot of years. It definitely took a lot of years. It took a lot of crying. It took a lot of accountability and acknowledgement that I felt like I was like suppressing in my body for a long time, but never really like acknowledged or felt the need to like really dissect. And I'm learning more about myself, and about some time goes by, and I'm trying to, sort of like rebuild a friendship or relationship with my ex, and that's not really going anywhere. Where because of, the distrust that you have with the distrust that he had within me, and him feeling the need to build up a wall against me, which is perfectly understandable, especially if you were unfaithful to someone for a long time, and you constantly hurt them. You made it seem like you were going to change as a person, and you didn't. And there's a lot of things that like I regret as I've gotten older. And it's kind of interesting how like you kind of change kind of like after the fact. So in a sense, I kind of feel like he kind of triggered me in a sense to like want to be a better person, and to like want to really reflect on myself, and wonder and like figure out why is it exactly that I couldn't love myself so that I can accept love from someone. And there's a lot of other things that you don't really think about growing up when you're young, and you're not necessarily like around the best people. And so I'm trying to get back with him, and that's not necessarily working out. And that sort of was getting depressing in itself, because it kind of just like you feel like you sort of like did all this work on yourself for someone else, and now you're sort of being rejected in the way that you rejected them. And I guess that's sort of like where ego and everything comes into place, where it's like you sort of have to learn that you have to understand that you may meet someone that like sort of triggers you to want to be a better person, but that doesn't mean that that person has to like accept you back into their life. Like sometimes you really are sort of meant to just meet a person. I know it sounds kind of cliche to say, but sometimes you really are just meant to meet a person just for a life lesson, and it wasn't really meant to be something that lasts a lifetime. And it hurts to say, because you do imagine like what your life would be like by now with them still there, and if things have gotten according to plan, and you sort of knew yourself, and you knew what you wanted, and you were in your divine, your divine essence. But I feel like my life definitely changed with him entering it, even though it was bittersweet at the end. Like I learned about myself, and I learned about myself now in ways I never would have before if I never met him, and I never went through that lesson of karma. And so this is also like around the time that I had recently came back from a North Carolina trip. I went in, I think maybe April of last year, and that was an interesting experience in itself, with just like sort of like, because I have a friend who lives in North Carolina, and going to see him for the first time and his background and his upbringing combined with mine, where it's like I've sort of just been oblivious my whole life and not really around a lot of people in close proximity, and not really like aware of certain behaviors that I have or certain traits that aren't really beneficial. I feel like I sort of had to like look at myself in the mirror when I was over there. And when I came back, I just had like a really different reflection on myself and on life and the way I treat other people and the way that I show love and appreciation towards certain people. And it was definitely an experience that I won't forget. And so that is sort of what actually triggered me to want to go see a therapist, which I will talk about in a different video, like what that was like for me, like to go, like my experience with therapy, what made me want to go towards it in the first place, how it's the experience, like, you know, looking for the right therapist, especially someone that looks like me and can relate to me, and I felt like was really listening to me and understanding me, and if I feel like it's really helped me since then. And so after that experience in North Carolina, that is what sort of like is what made me like sort of like want to seek out therapy and really seek out like better a better bit of closure when it came to like the relationship, and like me feeling like I did all this, like I mentioned, me feeling like I did all this work for a person for just for me to get rejected at the end, when really it was really for myself. The universe was sort of like guiding me to work on myself and sort of like hibernate in a sense and really do some reflection on my life and where it was going and what exactly is my life purpose. And so now this sort of like, and speaking of life's purpose, this is what sort of leads me into what made me leave the fast food industry service after maybe about a decade.